All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Today is we're going to be doing the environmental dimension of wellness, of the 8 dimensions of wellness. And as you'll hear me say, I'm here at Ocean City Library, and I thank Ocean City Library for having me. We have participants live in the audience that are enjoying their lunch for the Lunch and Learn that was provided by the library. So many thanks to the library for that. And we also have folks that are online, as I mentioned, to those people that are here in the audience live. So today's lesson is one of 10 lessons in the series of the 8 Dimensions of Wellness that I have created with my colleague Jen Shakaitis. I am Chris Zellers, and I am the Family and Community Health Sciences educator for Rutgers Cooperative Extension. And before we get started, just a little bit about Rutgers Cooperative Extension for those of you that may not know about us. We are a collaborative between Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and USDA and NIFA. And right now we have faculty or staff in all 21 of our counties throughout the state, which is great. And we also have 3 departments. My department's Family and Community Health Sciences. We focus a lot on food safety, wellness, food and nutrition, physical activity. Another department that we have is Agriculture and Natural Resources. And then the final department, which a lot of people have heard of, is 4-H Youth Development. So just a little bit about Rutgers Cooperative Extension there. Of course, Rutgers Cooperative Extension is an affirmative action, equal opportunity employer. The dimensions of wellness, we're going to review them, and we have a couple of objectives here to do that. First, we're going to define the dimension of wellness. We're going to talk about the overall concept of it. We're going to understand how the 8 dimensions interact with one another to balance things out. And then we're going to discover ways to achieve and maintain or maybe improve wellness. So currently the wellness industry is a $4 trillion industry. So that means that people really have latched onto this idea of wellness. But really, I asked for information from the group and nobody really had an answer for me because it's really a vague type of topic area and has a lot of meanings to different people. So when you actually go in and you search the term wellness, you may see an image of somebody doing yoga or in a spa or something like that, people meditating. You might even see an ad for an essential oils. And I've said in the other classes, a lot of times you see things now, just random things like shoes or cars associated with wellness and how they can make you better overall well. So it is a very vague term. We say it's vague, but actually it's really not that vague. There is science-based information out there to help us understand what the concept of wellness means. And when I first started in this department 5 years ago, we say that one of the things we do is we teach wellness. And I said to myself, well, what exactly is wellness? I asked the same question, and if I'm going to teach it, I want to know what it is. So I had a generalized concept of what that was. But then I decided, we do everything at Rutgers Cooperative Extension in research-based information. So I wanted to find out who had the information out there that was research-based. And it turns out that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, has created a definition of wellness. And this definition includes a holistic approach, meaning it includes many things. And it's not based upon one idea, but rather the functioning of several concepts to create overall balance. So as I mentioned, wellness has become a common term, and it's something that we really use frequently, and it's often vague, and it's often without a definitive explanation of what it is. Although we usually attribute it to something good, which I guess is okay. Hopefully, you realize that you don't have to spend part of that $4 trillion of your money to be well. We're going to go over the different concepts of wellness, the different dimensions of wellness, and how they interact with one another, like I mentioned, and give you an idea of how, if you're not feeling quite well, you might be able to balance one area or the other to make yourself feel more balanced. I will say that, SAMHSA does define wellness, has the vision of wellness not only as the absence of disease, illness, and stress, but also as the presence of positive purpose in life. And I think that that's really important. You'll hear me say positive over and over again throughout the lesson here. It also includes satisfying work and play, purpose in life, joyful relationships, a healthy body and living environment, which we're going to talk about today, and happiness overall. The 8 dimensions, as you'll see up here on the screen, include emotional, environmental, financial, intellectual, physical, occupational, social, and spiritual. And again, today we're doing environmental wellness. And you can see here on the screen the definition of environmental wellness, which we'll hit a couple times, but it's enjoying enjoying good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well-being. And just to note, this is the list of the 8 dimensions, again, with their definitions alongside of them. I have environmental highlighted there because that's what we're doing today, but they're not in any order other than alphabetical order. So there's no level of importance here. So we're not overemphasizing emotional over spiritual, but rather just in alphabetical order for us to see. A really important part of well-being or wellness is balancing these 8 dimensions of wellness that we're going to talk about. And because we each have individual needs, we have individual preferences and capabilities, what we consider balance personally is probably going to look different than the person next to us or somebody on the other side of the screen. So a lot of times people may, somebody might feel very balanced socially, but physically they could strive for more balance. So just take a few minutes as we're going through the 8 dimensions here and, kind of think to yourself, where do you feel strongest? Like, which of the 8 dimensions do you feel strongest in? And that's really going to help you to understand where maybe you need some work or where the positiveness is coming in from what area. So as we go through, just think a little bit about where you feel really, really confident. And the important thing about the 8 dimensions, when I put them up there, I'll do that now, actually. When I put them up there, you can see they're kind of cyclical. They're touching one another. And that's because they can have a ripple effect on one another. If you're not feeling very well emotionally, that could impact your physical wellness, your environmental wellness, like so many different things. But if you have a positive purpose, as we discussed earlier, that can ripple out and have a really positive effect on everything that trickles out. So hopefully that's the case. As you see here, the environmental dimension of wellness means being in a safe and feeling safe. It includes clean air, food, water, preserving areas where we live, learning and working, occupying pleasant environments, and learning and exploring natural spaces. So environmental wellness complements the other 7 dimensions of wellness, as we'll see here today, and how they interact with one another. I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it again today. It's true for all 8 dimensions of wellness. There's a lot of, you'll see today, there's subcategories for each, for environmental wellness. And as we talk about environmental wellness and these subcategories, it could be a little overwhelming. You look at it. I use the analogy all the time of New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to run 50 miles a day. You have all these resolutions that are, a lot of them are unobtainable, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. And that's why a lot of times resolutions don't work. So one of the things you want to make sure to do is take small steps, break things down within each dimension, within each subcategory. You can even break things down. So take small steps. Keep in mind that a lot of times creating a new healthy habit could take us 6 weeks. Again, we're individuals. It might take you more time to create that healthy habit, but you want to make sure to try to break them down into your individual needs and not get overwhelmed. If you do something, you make a goal, we'll set goals at the end of the class today. If you make a goal to do something and say it goes to the wayside, things happen, life happens, right? So go back and revisit that. Revisit the 8 dimensions as well as you go through the cycle and say, well, I was doing really well in this area, and now I upped my environmental wellness game, and now I'm not doing well in this area. So just keep revisiting the dimensions and looking into and thinking about and being mindful of what you're doing throughout your journey of finding wellness. So as I mentioned earlier, there's individual areas within each of the dimensions, and you'll see here the grouping that they have for these areas is green living, change of scenery, and home and work environment. And what we'll do is we'll break each of these 3 areas down as we go through the class today and kind of discover what they mean and how you might find wellness in these different areas. When I first started thinking about wellness and I thought about, working on this presentation, I thought, wow, environmental wellness, this is a really big chunk to chew. Our environment's huge. How do I control that? And even though our big world environment is something that's overwhelming, it's hard for us to control obviously those things that are out of our control. Can be frustrating sometimes. But there's simple things that you can do within this area of environmental wellness to, contribute to the overall picture. And they can be very, very simple things. Am I popping up here? Here we go. So the first thing you can do for green living is simple: recycle, maybe limit the power and water use that you use in the day. I used to go in and knock on the bathroom door when my one son was in there and say to him, the mayor called, they're out of water, because he would take such long showers. Sometimes, I get it. I like a nice long warm shower, but sometimes, cutting that back a little bit is a good way to limit the usage. Turn the lights off when you leave the room or something like that. So we'll discuss a little bit more how you can contribute to that. Another way that you can contribute to the overall environment and green living is taking public transportation. So we decrease our environmental footprint. Check your car's emission. Get regular checkups on your car, make sure your car is up to date and running properly so that it's not putting pollutants into the environment. So they're just a couple of really simple ideas. Obviously, if you're looking for a goal, you can start by doing that if you're not already doing it. And if you're already doing it, thank you and congratulations. You're already completing one of the areas of environmental wellness. And then in the next area, in the context of change of scenery and environment, SAMHSA emphasizes enjoying the outdoors and outdoor time. And the benefit of a breath of fresh air, they're endless. I remember when we opened the boardwalks back up and the beaches back up during the COVID-19 pandemic. I just went down on the beach and I kept taking deep breaths. And my husband said, "What are you like? Are you all right?" He thought it was, I said, "No, I'm just like breathing in the fresh air." It's just, it was just such a relief to me to be able to be out there in the outdoors again. So that benefit of a breath of fresh air, being in the outdoors, is really helpful to us. So enjoy outdoor time as you can. Even if it's, we live in New Jersey, even if it's cold outside, try to get outside, bundle up and get that fresh air, even when it's not so nice outside. Try to visit outdoor places for recreation. Think about where you can be in nature and, and discover new places for recreation. Let's go up. If you go to a new area, say for vacation, look up where you might go for a walk or a hike. There's lots of great opportunities out there to be in nature. All right, and then next we have home and environment. And when you think of environmental wellness, the first thing you may have come to mind is, doing a beach cleanup or, cleaning up some area outside, which is great. That's a great thing to be involved in. But having your personal environment cleaned up is really important too. And this is one that really speaks to me personally. Having your work area or your home space decluttered, organize the space that you do have, so that they include things that make you happy and fill you with joy. Create something that, has living space and textures that are going to be appealing to you and make you want to be in your environment and make you happy in your environment. I will say, we're going to talk about small steps about how we can do different things and what we can do to be decluttered. This is a big issue for me. And so I'm an organized person and I don't like clutter. However, my husband, when we were first married, would save every receipt of every credit card. He's going to kill me for saying this. But yeah, so that, and I used to say with him, like, it messes with the voices in my head, and I'm not being like, it just like could not create a sense of calm because there would be piles of paper all over the dining room table or wherever. So you need to really think about what that decluttered look like for you. And again, it's going to look different for everybody, but I think it's important that you recognize that part of your environmental wellness is your home and work area and how that can impact these other dimensions of wellness. Like it was impacting my emotional wellness by having the clutter around. And he, after 35 years, I will tell you, he's gotten his act together and we don't have that problem anymore, right? So the next thing we're going to talk about is how we can make some positive changes to create environmental wellness in our lives, so that hopefully we're, able to get that. We understand now green living, we're talking about, we were going to recycle and participate in what makes the overall environment really good. And so getting recycling bins for your home, sometimes they're free in town, sometimes they're not. But getting those recycling bins, labeling them, even recycling your clippings for your yard, that can help the environment too. Or, if you want to create some type of compost thing, you can look into that if it's allowable in your municipality. To preserve the planet, take shorter showers, as we already talked about. Turn off your lights when you leave the room, or even turn off the fans if you're not if you have the overhead fans, maybe turn them off. That'll cut down on energy use as well. As far as we all have the things that the plugs we plug in for our devices that are scattered all over the house. And if they're plugged in, they're still going to use some energy. So it's good to unplug them when not in use and charging. You also could look for volunteer opportunities to help clean up and make an opportunity. I know a lot of times they were, like I said, beach cleanups, but there's all around. Even if you just go for a walk, I've noticed here in Ocean City on my beach, there's a little container thing that has recyclable bags that if you go for a walk, you can pick up the trash, which is great. So that's another way that you can contribute in a small way. And take part in that volunteer opportunity, even if it's not designated as a volunteer opportunity, you can make your own. There's also this wonderful gentleman that I always thank that lives somewhere in the area I live in, and he walks up and down the bike path, and I see him all the time with his bag picking up. He has a little stick and picks up the trash. So things like that just contribute more. Going to the green aisles, I have it spelled wrong on the slide, but in the notes here, it's correct. Going to the green aisle at the home improvement store often helps with being more energy efficient. So they have light bulbs that you can change your light bulbs out, other products that can help to make your carbon footprint a little bit smaller. And guess what? It could also help save energy bills. We all have been really hit hard with the high energy bills and things like that lately. So these are just small steps that you can use at home to support better green living and save a little money in your pocket as well. Another area that I personally love is planting a garden. Now, this could be a vegetable garden, it could be flowers, it could be trees, it could be anything, but you're adding to the green environment around you. You're helping to support the things that make the environment better. And they're beautiful. It's a fun thing to do. And to promote, how that can interact with another dimension of wellness. Gardening promotes physical activity. So then you have a part of the physical dimension that you're checking off by doing that too. So all good ways to, create that green living for environmental wellness. All right, so next we talked about ways to change our scenery and our environmental wellness, a change of scenery. So think about what activities that you could do outdoor that would make you feel good and find some different options. And that, again, like I know during the shutdown of the pandemic, when I would walk around town, I would go out for a walk and I'd see people like in their backyards and their driveways, and they would be working out just to get outside and get some fresh air. But you can still do that. That's over and we can go work out wherever we want. But being outside, maybe doing yoga or stretching in the yard, on the beach. In Cape May County, we're really fortunate to have opportunities where we can be outside and do a lot of activity. So go ahead, try to be outside. Even go outside. We talked about in the spiritual dimension of wellness, how breathing in the fresh air or feeling a breeze on our face can help with our spiritual and our emotional wellness. And getting outside and doing those things could really help. Just taking a couple deep breaths or sitting quietly and listening to the trees rustle or the ocean, that could really help a lot with your environmental wellness. Studies have been done recently. There's a lot of studies being done about the benefits of exercise in nature. And the conclusion is that exercising in the woods or in a beautiful outdoor space can reduce stress and improve our anxiety and depression symptoms. So that's another good way, again, with helping with your spiritual and your emotional well-being, being outside and doing those things. The other thing you can do, which I don't see a lot of people doing anymore, but it's a good idea. Take meals outside on the patio. I do see that, but have a picnic. How often do you see people picnicking? Not so much anymore, but it's a great way to take things along. I know sometimes it's a little extra work to pack all that stuff up, but it's great to be out there, play with the kids or the grandkids, have some time out and take a picnic. The other thing you can do is during your day, whether it be work hours or if you're retired and you're doing things around the house, is just take a break and maybe walk around the block or walk around the parking lot, have lunch outside with a colleague. do things during the day that involve taking a break outside and changing your environment during the day, to help support your wellness and your environmental wellness. And then sometimes, we get stuck in doing things in the house or the workspace. So changing the environment we're in can really help to refocus us. If you think about moving your workspace to a coffee shop, if that's an opportunity, or a library here, I'll come work at the Ocean City Library and hide in a corner. So it's, without disruption, so that I can get tedious tasks done. That helps a lot. So, think about those opportunities. Maybe if you're going to read a book, change where you're going to read the book that day, instead of on the sofa at home. It'll give you a little change of environment. And that's good for the well-being overall. All right. And then the final one is the keys to home and work for environmental wellness. Um, there's small things that we can do to change environmental wellness that can be more manageable. Less clutter means more room for us to live, work, and work comfortably. And that is an important thing to do. But it can be hard. I'll be the first one to say it. I say all the time, we got to clean up the basement. If you could make time to clean up your home or your living space, try, if it's an all-day activity and it's not going to be overwhelming, that's great. If you say, I'm going to get this done today, and you have the time to do that, wonderful. But again, think back to when I said take things in steps if you need to break them out. So it might be all day, it might be a room by room activity. Maybe you make a schedule like, okay, I'm going to clean the bathrooms out on Sunday, I'm going to dust and sweep every Wednesday, but keeping that environment clean and clutter-free, it's going to really go a long way in making you feel better about your home space and your living environment. And that goes for your workspace too. I find myself, especially when I'm doing this class in the office, I'm like grabbing things off the desk and moving them to other spaces so people can't see behind me that, I have piles of stuff. So try to go through those piles of things, get rid of mail when it comes in, if it's no good. You don't have to keep it and hang on to it. Try to get rid of those things so it's not creating unwanted clutter in your life. You also want to try to stay organized. If there's ways, that you can label things and keep them in one spot so it's more inviting and comfortable, that's great. But, getting too many of them might become a problem too. So watch out for that trap. Try to do little things at a time. As I mentioned, say to yourself, okay, over a 4-week period, I'm going to clean out the nightstands in my bedroom. Maybe that's enough, and find how you do things. Watch how you store things. Really ask yourself if you need that. How much do you need it? So I always use the example, we've moved several times, and we moved one time, and I go upstairs to our room and there's this trophy on my husband's nightstand and it's peeling. It was from high school. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, that's a trophy I got in high school. And I'm like, awesome. What's it doing here? And he's like, oh, well, it meant a lot to me. Well, so I let it stay for a little while. And I was like, you know what? How about if we take a picture of it? So that's stuff that is really hard to get rid of because you have an emotional attachment to it. Try to take a picture of it. You can keep the picture. It's going to take up a lot less space than that trophy did. So think about ways that you can keep that memory if you're having a hard time of that object. Keep a memory of that object rather than the actual object if it's cluttering up your space and it's something you really don't need. I know when you experience loss, that a lot of times is a reason why people hang on to things. And that loss is forever, right? But that memory of holding on to that certain thing might be good for you if it is good for you emotionally. But again, if it's cluttering up your home and workspace, your home or workspace, then maybe just find a way to donate it or take a picture of it or do something that it's not cluttering up your space that you need for healthy living. The other thing that they emphasize here is to find your style. So if you have a living area that, you're not quite sure of, it's not very comfortable, you're not utilizing it, it's just filled up with, maybe stuff. Try to look at how you can rearrange that area so you can utilize it and it is more inviting. Pick a style that you enjoy that's clean and clutter-free, and doesn't cost a lot of money so that you can enjoy that space and not be contending with the clutter that might be there. And again, there's ways that you can look at magazines or things online and say, oh, I like this style, and not have to spend a whole lot of money to do it, to create that space. All right, so we're back to the environmental dimension of wellness. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, you know, there's 8 dimensions, and they can affect each other in positive and negative ways. I talked a little bit about that today, about how we could be negatively impacted by too much clutter and things going on so in our lives. So try to find ways that you can include environmental wellness. Remember that it involves being able to be safe and feel safe. It includes access to clean, fresh air, food and water, preserving areas where we live, work, and play, occupying pleasant environments, and learning and exploring natural spaces. Examples of how environmental wellness interact with other dimensions, I mentioned a few throughout. So for instance, physical wellness, engaging in physical activity or exercise outside for environmental wellness will help you to be more physically active, which can help your physical wellness. And then socially, if we keep our personal space nice and clutter-free and organized, we'll be more likely to invite friends over, have company stop by. And so we could have better social interactions, because if you're having to run around and shut doors and clean up, it's not always like so easy to have those people over and have that socialization. And then financially, for financial wellness, being organized and creating a pleasant and stimulating environment can help us to manage our finances better too, because if we have a lack of organization overall in our environment and our life, you're probably spending money on things that you don't need. And that's going to cause hardships on the money that you've earned. So you want to make sure to try to, keep things organized. I always, my father was great for this. He had every tool you could ever made by man ever. I see people laughing like, yep, I know what you're talking about. And then he couldn't find them because they weren't organized. So then he'd go buy it again. So when he passed, it was like, okay, here's 75 of this tool, not that many, but yeah. So it's, if you have the opportunity to be clutter-free and organized, it's going to help to save you money and create better financial wellness for you. And then as we talked about a little bit, and how the environmental wellness can really impact our emotional wellness, occupying pleasant and stimulating environments, which is part of environmental wellness, that can really also be part of our emotional wellness, because it gives us that opportunity to, kind of quiet things in our mind around us, and have that opportunity for downtime that can benefit our emotional wellness. So you can see how these different dimensions can interact with one another, and how they interact with one another frequently. All right, so here we're going to sum up a little bit about environmental wellness. We know that green living, we can contribute to that, even though it's a very big task. We know that change of scenery is important, because we can exercise in it, or we can be out in it, and it can create calmness and emotional well-being. And we know that we want to make sure that we have our home and environment clean and clutter-free, so that we have a sense of calm within them. And as you've seen throughout the discussion today, within each of the areas of environmental wellness, there's reoccurring themes. So we heard things like organization, clutter-free, outdoor time, taking small steps, and being mindful of our environment to create wellness balance for ourselves. So try to find ways to fill your environment with time that you need to organize space, or spend times outdoors, and find a comfortable space for yourself. So one of the things that we review all the time is setting a goal. So now you've learned what environmental wellness is, how it interacts, how to be positive. We really want to take a minute now and try to figure out how to be well with environmental wellness. So, again, definition encompasses overall environmental wellness and enjoying good, healthy, and occupying safe spaces that support our well-being. And one of the ways we can do this is through the SMART method. And the SMART method, it was invented for workplace goals, but it's so fitting that I use it all the time, and so many other people use it. But the SMART method stands for S is specific, measured, attainable, and timely, or realistic and timely. And setting a goal like this can be very beneficial, especially, remember I mentioned in the beginning, we wanted to do small steps. and we wanted to revisit. So if you set a goal for your environmental wellness today, which hopefully you will, and then, next week you're like, oh, I went to that class last week and Chris was talking about small steps. Now I forget what my goal was. You can go back to the SMART method and say, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do, and revisit it and start again, hopefully, for better ability to do that. So an example that I have up here, so specific would be for better environmental wellness. I'm going to organize my space by getting rid of clutter. And again, you could pick one space, like say it's the kitchen, maybe it's this silverware drawer. It can be like so small that you just start in one space. And I feel like getting started, it's always the hardest part with anything. I always used to say that when I taught at the gym, the hardest part's getting there. And once you're there, you're good. So start with something small, specific, that you can do. And then you're going to put some type of measurement in there. So I'll start by doing this room by room in my house. Something that's attainable. I'm going to organize it 1 hour each day to organize one space in one room. So I'm going to be on vacation in the next couple weeks. I'm doing a staycation, and I've already put up a goal, like for how many hours I'm going to spend a day doing something. So I have a goal ahead of time, and I don't feel like I'm spending my whole vacation mopping the floors, but rather getting things done and also enjoying the time off. You want to make sure that it's realistic. If I can't clean one day, then I'll try to add 15 minutes to another day for each day of the week. And then you want to do something that's timely. Oops. I'll start today and do this for a month, and then look at my progress for further motivation. So if you look at your progress and you can look back and say, wow, I did this a little bit at a time and look what I accomplished. I feel like, especially with organizing and decluttering, there's a sense of accomplishment there. I always take a picture before and after. So like if I'm organizing the kitchen cabinet or something like that, if you take a picture beforehand and you check out what's happening, and what the clutter looks like beforehand, and then you take it after, you get a sense of accomplishment. So try to find ways to have some type of sense of accomplishment, so that these goals are motivational as well. And then finally, again, to be environmentally well, we understand the goal method and everything, and what it's like, but try to revisit the goal, like I said, so that if you're not feeling environmentally well, you can get there. And once you feel you have mastered the goal that you're setting today, try to find room to add another little one. Reevaluate, as I mentioned already, and try to see, how did the environmental wellness that I've created with this goal impact, like maybe my physical wellness or my emotional wellness, so that you have a better idea of how they're all impacting one another throughout your time set. So, and that's it. Thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.